Here's a quick beginner video on taking profits. So as a new trader, most beginner traders typically will buy calls and puts when they're starting out, and normally they will buy out of the money. And I'm sure you've heard that time decay or theta is your enemy when you're buying options. So I wanted to show you a time decay graph so you can see the impact that time decay has on your long options that are out of the money. And you can notice the graph is not a straight line. Most people think theta is a straight line decline, that it's going to decay at the same rate every day, but actually it's an exponential decline. And you can see as the days progress, time decay gets faster and faster to where when you get at the 30-day mark, you can see on the right side there, time decay under 30 days is when it's most rapid. So if you're buying options, say 2 to 3 months out, you want to start looking at taking those options off when you get to the 3 to 4 week mark, because what's going to happen is the stock is going to have to move significantly higher to fight off the time decay that's occurring on those options. So that's something to consider if you're holding options and you hit the 30-day mark. Whether you're up or down, you may want to start looking, taking that off, realizing that it's highly unlikely that the stock is going to move to offset the time decay. Now you will find situations where you take it off early, and if you had have waited, you could have made more money and you're going to be kicking yourself for closing out early. But I guarantee you that more often than not, you'll be glad you did. If you would keep a trade log of all your trades, you'll start seeing that the ones you hold expiration probably lost you more money or even lost you the full amount versus if you'd have closed those out 3 to 4 weeks before expiration. So that's one thing to keep in mind when you're buying long options. Another thing you want to look at too is the theta and delta relationship. So here is SPY. I'm looking options 2 weeks out. And if we just pick a strike price, the 275 strike price that's out of the money right now, you can see that the theta is 21 cents and the delta is 0.05. So what delta is telling you is how much your option will increase in value for every 1 point SPY goes up. So if you're already up on your position and you're deciding whether or not to take the profit or not, here's a good thing to look at, because what this tells you is every day that passes by, you're going to start losing 5 cents of your option, of your profit. So within about 4 days, you would have lost 20 cents worth of profit that even if SPY shot up 1 point, you wouldn't make any money, because all it's going to do is basically be a wash. You would make 21 cents for SPY going up 1 point, but you're going to lose 20 cents for the 4 days passage of time. So you want to look at this to evaluate, do you realistically think that your stock or ETF can go up another point within a very short amount of time to offset the time decay that's going to occur in that same time period? If you don't think it's possible, then you should go ahead and take the trade off, because it doesn't make sense to keep the trade on if you're just going to be fighting against time decay the whole time. Another thing you can do too is maybe take off half of the position. So if you're insisting on holding on to that position through expiration, and if you have more than one contract, maybe sell half of your contracts to go ahead and lock in some of that profit, to at least maybe make it to where, worst case scenario, if the stock turns against you, you can still break even on the stock because you've already sold off and collected some profit. So that's another thing to consider too, is that you don't always have to close out your entire position. You can just take off some of the contracts to at least lock in some of that profit. And the other thing I would say too is you can look at using trailing stops. Not all brokers give you that option for when you're trading options, but if they do, like in my case, my broker TD Ameritrade allows me to do it. I will use that sometimes too, where if I want to go ahead and sell my option, but the stock is really running up and I'm afraid I'll miss out on some profits throughout the day, instead of going ahead and closing it out, what I will do is I'll put a trailing stop in, maybe 10 cents below the current option price, so that if it does continue to run the rest of the day, I'm locking in more profits as the stock goes up because my trailing stop will move along with the option price to where I maybe can get stopped out at a higher price. But I would only do that for the day because stops don't really help you overnight. If news comes out overnight that affects the stock, well, your trailing stop will be useless. So I may only use that just for the day. If I'm already made the decision I want to get out, I'll just put the trailing stop in, and by the end of the day, if my trailing stop hasn't been hit, I would probably just go ahead and close out the trade anyway. So that's looking at it from the side of a buyer of options. Now, as a seller of options, time decay is your friend. You actually make money through the passage of time, because when you sell an option, you initially receive a credit. Let's say that credit is $1. Well, as time passes, that option will drop in value to where it will eventually go to zero, and the more that it drops, the more profit you're locking in. So most traders who sell options think, oh, well, if I make money off the passage of time, it makes sense for me to hold until the very last day, to hold when this option goes to zero. That's the logical mindset, is that that's when you can reach your max potential. But actually there's been some studies done, and if you will go on YouTube and search for managing winners, you will find some videos by tastytrade, and it's this third one here called Managing Winners in Your Trading Strategy. It's a really great video. It's a study they did over several different stocks for several years to show that it actually didn't make sense to hold the option to expiration as a seller. They found the sweet spot was only hold it until you've got 50% of your max profit. So my earlier example where I said if you got a credit for $1, once you were able to lock in 50 cents of that dollar, it would be best to go ahead and take that off and get out of the trade, and then reallocate your money into a new trade that you would then get out when you've reached 50% profit on it. So they did that study and showed that you would make more money by getting out at the 50% level versus holding all the way through expiration. And the main reason for that is, the longer you hold, there is that risk of the stock moving against you and dropping below your strike in the case of selling puts. So to eliminate that risk, if you've already got profit realized, in this case 50%, it's best to go ahead and lock in that profit, take the risk off, and then go enter a new trade and do that over and over again. So the takeaways from this would be, if you're long options, if you're long options, you want to try to close the position 3 to 4 weeks before expiration, before the time decay really starts affecting your option. Or you can close half of your position to lock in some profits and let the rest ride if you want to see if you can still get some money off of it. Also look at your delta theta relationship to see how much the stock has to move to offset theta eating away at your option. And then also possibly use trailing stops. And then if you're short options, if you're selling puts or selling calls or selling credit spreads, you want to look at taking those trades off early around the 50% max. You may want to wait a little longer and go for 70% or something like that, but the key to this is you don't want to hold it until expiration. I can't tell you how many times I've had a credit spread or I've sold a put and I'm waiting till Friday to squeeze in the last little amount of money, and then something happens, some news comes out that affects my stock to where now I'm losing money. And so it's a good habit to get into, to always take your trades off early and lock in profits.